examined by those 2,000 so-called journalists. Why did these not guilty verdicts come in? They just went on to the next thing. It wasn't even looked at.
Yeah, that is true. And the reason for that is because the media was slightly humiliated by the verdicts because they had been making this concerted effort for the past 4 months or something. The trial was about 4 months long. They've been making this concerted effort to try to portray Jackson as guilty, twisting the testimony, picking out tiny sound bites which misrepresent the testimony. This kind of, if Jackson had a good day in court, if Jackson had a bad day in court, for instance, so it's a prosecution witness and Tom Snedden or Ron Zonen is interviewing them, then what that is essentially, that's just a chance for the prosecution to get their witness to make their allegation. That's just a chance for the boy to come on the stand and make all these graphic allegations. And of course that gets run as a double page spread in most newspapers. He slid his hand down my pants, says boy, or whatever. And, you get all these graphic descriptions and pictures, drawings of the witness looking all sympathetic. And then the next day, Thomas Mesereau will take the floor and destroy that witness. Catch him out in lies, prove that he's lied in the past, prove that he's lied about sexual molestation in the past, pick up the grand jury testimony and say, well, yesterday you said this, but in the grand jury testimony you said that. Yesterday you said this, but in the police interview you said that. He caught him out in lie after lie after lie, including big lies. Lies about, he said that Michael Jackson had told him that all boys have to masturbate because otherwise they'll rape people. And it turned out that Michael Jackson had never said that to him. He admitted on the stand that his grandmother had actually said that to him. Enormous lies, which would, in most people's eyes, be the difference between thinking Jackson is innocent or guilty. And then when that happens, the media is kind of embarrassed about the fact that 1 day or 2 days previously, they ran this big double-page spread, which kind of portrayed Jackson as guilty. And now, actually, the defense team has completely destroyed that witness. And so what they do is, rather than saying, oops, we got it wrong, oops, yesterday's story was a big pile of rubbish, here's the fact, they just go, right, we'll stick that, 3 paragraphs on page 27 under a Specsavers advert, or whatever. They give it comparatively no airtime or no space in the newspaper or the magazine. If they feel, it's a bit like 93, they're not willing to prepare, they're not prepared to admit that they were incorrect. They're not prepared to admit that yesterday's story wasn't actually accurate. And so when those verdicts came in, the media was mortified because despite all their efforts, despite, systematically portraying Jackson as guilty, the verdicts still came in as they should have done, and the media knew that that's what the verdict should have been all along. And probably, I imagine as well, they were all geared up for a guilty verdict. They probably had all these packages made up, Jackson in dark lighting with sinister music, and all these pre-recorded VTs. And I imagine that they were so confident that they had successfully skewed the verdict that they didn't even bother to make an alternative for if he was found not guilty. So I think it's a combination of the fact that they were humiliated by the verdict, and they probably felt, the media as a whole probably felt quite emasculated by the verdict because it undermined them because they've been so conservatively trying to portray him as guilty. And also, I think they just weren't prepared for the verdict because they were so confident that they had been successful in skewing the verdict.
How much do you know how much was spent on the prosecution total?
Millions. I don't know the exact amount, but it was millions. Thomas Mesereau famously said repeatedly since the trial that team of prosecutors, that police force, spent more money and put more resources into trying to convict Michael Jackson than have ever been put into catching any serial killer. They spent atrocious amounts of money on the prosecution of Michael Jackson, right down to setting up hotlines so that supposed victims could call in. After the allegations broke in 2003, they They set up these hotlines so you could call in and claim that you were molested by Michael Jackson. And they received thousands of calls, and every single one of them was found to have absolutely no validity whatsoever. In addition to these hotlines, they built a website with Michael Jackson's mugshot on it, almost like a prize, like chopping the head off of a lion after you've shot it, and sticking it on the wall. They took this mugshot and they kind of mocked him by setting up this special website with his mugshot on it. Like, look what we did to Michael Jackson. Then you have the DA Tom Sneddon spending enormous amounts of money just traveling to all different continents looking for victims. This was the definition. This was the dictionary definition of a malicious prosecution. You have a prosecutor traveling around the world looking for victims of Michael Jackson. That's how obsessed he was. It's not, okay, somebody's come to us and they've made a legitimate allegation, so we're going to try it. It's, let's travel halfway around the world looking for anyone who's going to say something nasty about Michael Jackson. They spent, it was millions. I can't remember exactly how much, although I imagine it was very profitable overall for the community. You have, like you said earlier, 2,000 journalists, plus their cameramen, plus their drivers, plus their assistants, plus their makeup artists and their hairdressers and their, sound technicians. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people coming to Santa Barbara for months on end, staying in hotels, hiring parking spaces, hiring satellite van spaces, buying food, going out to the nightclubs and the bars. So although the prosecution spent a phenomenal amount of money trying to pin something on Michael Jackson, they also, for the community, made a hell of a lot of money because it attracted so many people to the area for so long.
And Aphrodite Jones, when it came time for her to assemble all this material, she looked at all the court documents, and she wrote a book, and the publishers would not publish a positive book about Michael Jackson, even though she had how many bestsellers?
She'd had, by that point, I think, 7 New York Times top 10 bestsellers. She was a very respected true crime writer. And when she went to the publishers and she said, look, I've done all this research, I've spent 6 months. She spent 6 months reading the transcripts and writing the book. She put so much research into this book, she had to buy a second computer because she couldn't, her one computer couldn't hold her research and her writing at the same time. That's how much effort and research she put into this book. And although it was completely grounded in fact, it was completely rooted in the trial transcript. She went to the courthouse, she photographed, photocopied every page of every trial transcript. She took pictures of all of the evidence. And the publishers just weren't interested. They just kept telling her, if it's pro-Jackson, then we don't want it. But I think more telling than the Aphrodite Jones situation is the Thomas Mesereau situation. Mesereau being Jackson's lawyer. He was actually offered book deals. Aphrodite Jones was out looking for a book deal. Thomas Mesereau was offered book deals by every major publishing company in America. But when he told them that he would not, that he was not a turncoat, when he told them, I will not say that I believe Michael Jackson is guilty, every single publishing company retracted its offer. They were only prepared to give him a book deal if he said something nasty about Michael Jackson.
It's just astounding. It's a case for just looking at how mass media operates, and even publishing. When you look at the books that are available about Michael Jackson out there, many of them are smear books, and there's not. If you read several of these books, you come to know that they're not well written. They're full of inaccuracies and lies. Let's talk about books on Michael Jackson from your point of view, Charles Thomson.
A phenomenal amount has been written about Michael Jackson, huge amounts, much of it very lazy. In the aftermath of Michael Jackson's death, pretty much every publishing company seemed to be just churning out biographies within about 2 weeks, and I mean, if you're going to write a biography of someone in 2 weeks, how good can it be? You just can't write